All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the third day of gCON. We have another great keynote presentation for you today from Adam Swidler. He's the head of solution strategy for Google Apps at Google. I'm going to introduce him in just a minute, but there are a few things that I want to cover before we go ahead and get started. If this is your first time joining us for gCON, I want to go ahead and introduce myself as well. My name is Andrew McGonigal. I'll be your host for this presentation and for the rest of the week. And I'm also going to be holding my own keynote presentation tomorrow morning at the same time. So if you haven't already, please register for that keynote presentation. You can find a link to it in the right-hand side of your screen using the Showcase app. And while I'm talking about the Showcase app now, I just want to remind everyone that we are going to be using a couple of different applications in the Hangouts on Air interface. So we're going to be using the Showcase app, which allows us to provide some easy links for you to use on the right-hand side of your screen. It'll allow us to put up the attendance form so you can easily fill that out. And we're also going to be handling questions there as well. We want to make this as interactive as possible. Adam has, prepared plenty of time to answer questions for his presentation. So, this is a great opportunity to ask questions for someone who is, very involved in the process for shaping the product in Google Apps. So, if you have, any questions related to Google Apps, feel free to submit them in the Q&A app on the right-hand side of your screen. And if you're having trouble finding that, you should see a little square icon with a few squares inside of it at the top of your screen in the on the Google Plus event page, and you can click on that and switch from the Showcase app to the Q&A app. So that should be, it's a really easy way for us to see your questions and pass them along to Adam. I wanted to talk a little bit about yesterday. We had 3 great presentations, more than 2,000 people registered for those, and we have another great set of presentations for today that we'll mention towards the end. So with that, I just want to remind everyone to please, submit as many questions or as many good questions as you can for Adam, so we can, really take an in-depth look at during this discussion and make it as interactive as possible. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Adam. Like I mentioned, he's the head of solution strategy for Google Apps at Google, and he's going to go ahead and start his presentation. So Adam, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks very much, Andrew. Thanks for having me today, and welcome everyone. Looking forward to a great day of gCON. As Andrew said, my name is Adam Swidler. I work on the Google for Work strategy team, and I'm primarily focused these days on helping organizations understand and take advantage of the Google Apps tool suite with a particular focus on some of the collaborative tools. And so today, what I wanted to talk about was a little bit about how technology is giving rise to these new digital businesses and how it's impacting existing incumbent businesses, and then how these businesses are adapting or forming specifically around getting work done. So I think we all know that technology is really changing everything, and it's actually starting probably more so in some of our personal and consumer lives, but obviously with Google Apps and other similar products really having a dramatic impact on our work lives. But it's also giving rise to brand new digital businesses that are really fundamentally fueled and even in some cases started specifically around technology. And we'll look at a couple of case studies that will provide some insight into how that's happening. But this technology curve is also forcing existing businesses to adapt, right? There's plenty of examples, and some of them that we'll talk about, of essentially upstart companies starting from almost nothing, coming into a market and using technology to really significantly disrupt it. And of course, many existing organizations are witnessing this and realizing that they need to be able to adapt and looking for ways and tools and technologies that can help them do that. And then in particular, I want to talk a little bit about something that's been labeled continuous productivity. And I'll kind of go through what the thesis of that is and what it looks like in businesses and organizations in a little bit of detail. Now, as Andrew said, we definitely want to try to make this as interactive as possible, so we've got the Q&A application running in the Hangouts. Feel free to enter your questions at any time. We will have time at the end of the session to go through an extended Q&A, but I'm also happy to answer stuff as it comes up. So I'll pause from time to time and ask Andrew if we've gotten any questions. So please feel free to submit things as they pop into your mind. Fundamentally, everything is now connected in the digital world that we live in. I can't see all of you out there right now, but I'm guessing that if I ask the question, how many of you, the first thing in the morning when you wake up, grab your cell phone and check your email or one of your social networks or find out what's going on? I know I do that, and I probably shouldn't, but I think it's the reality of where we live in our lives, in large part as a result of the advancement of these mobile devices and the advancement of the services behind them. And of course, those could be anything from, again, our social networks, obviously our email, other communications tools, but that device has become sort of the hub, the center, the entry point of our digital lives, and it has really fundamentally changed everything that we do. We've really moved from a world where, maybe 3-4 years ago, you would say something like, let me go online to check that for you, or I'll go online and see about that, to a world now where we literally live our lives online. And Gartner, one of the leading analysts in the tech space, has heard this refrain from their clients. And everyone is starting to think more deeply about technology and where it fits into their prioritization and how they can increase their digital maturity. There was also a study that came from IBM that indicated that technology is in the top 3 priorities for every single member of the CXO suite. So it's not just the CIO anymore that's really leading the charge around technology. It's the CEO, it's the CMO, and it's other leaders of the organization that also have technology at the very, very top of their priority list. So I mentioned a couple of case studies and examples that I wanted to share with you. So the first is Uber, which I'm sure almost all of you on the call have heard of. These guys have been in the news a tremendous amount lately. And they're absolutely fundamentally disrupting the taxi and personal transportation service.
Hey, Adam?
Yeah.
Do you mind if I stop you for a second? I just want to make sure that are you supposed to be in your presentation right now, or is that coming in a little bit? I just want to make sure we're...
Well, let's make sure we get those slides up there.
Yeah, sorry about that. I should have mentioned that before.
Tell me if those are coming through better.
There we go.
All right, so I'll just rewind all that. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, so a couple of case studies to talk about. The first one being Uber, right? These guys are fundamentally disrupting a highly regulated and very entrenched industry that is incredibly localized and fragmented. But they've burst upon the scene. They've gotten a ton of attention both in the media and from venture and investment people. So they've amassed this incredible capitalization and valuation. And one of the really innovative things that they've done, I think, is taken some of that and thought creatively about how do we use this capital most effectively. They've created a fund that's a couple $100 million, and maybe more by now, that's designed to offer low-interest loans to people that can go out and then buy cars and drive on their network. And Uber has obviously leveraged technology in a very significant way to change this model. Instead of walking outside and sort of hailing a cab, or worse, calling a dispatch and waiting interminably for the cab to come, you literally just pull out your device with a couple of clicks and gestures, you've got a ride lined up. It's beautifully simple. It's amazingly easy to use. There's no transaction of cash or money or any of those things which are typically thought of as unpleasant to the passenger. And it's informed by data in the sense that you get to see ratings of the drivers, they get to see ratings of the passengers, and when there's enough transactions and enough data taking place in that environment, that the data becomes reliable. And you don't need as much of an industry regulation as you have in the past with the taxi industry. Now, regulation is an interesting friction point in some of these areas. And one of the examples that I love to point out or bring up is regulation is likely to accelerate the adoption of these sort of viral, extremely market-sensing solutions and opportunities like Uber. And the example, those of you may remember this, over the summer, taxi drivers across many cities in Europe staged sort of a traffic jam demonstration because of their concern and the feeling of threat that they have from Uber and other services coming into their markets. Uber reported during that strike, their signups and registrations spiked 800%. And so I love that example that sort of plainly shows the harder you try to artificially regulate situations like this where the demand curve is just off the charts and a very elegant, simple solution comes in, when you try to regulate that away, you actually have a good chance of having that whole thing backfire and seeing it accelerate the change that's going on. So another great example is Airbnb. This one really blows my mind. So started in 2008. You guys, again, are probably familiar with these guys. They let you rent out rooms or couches or houses or even castles directly from the owner or through an agency directly online. In that period of time since 2008, they have amassed an inventory of rooms that's larger than Hilton, and their capitalization, their valuation is larger than Ramada, Wyndham, and Intercontinental hotels. Every night, I actually saw the CEO of Airbnb on The Daily Show a couple weeks ago, and I believe he said that every night, or that night that they were taping the broadcast, over 300,000 people that night were staying in an Airbnb property. It's phenomenal how these guys have taken advantage of technology to connect the buyer and the seller in a market in a very seamless transaction. And again, based on data, that's what's regulating the system and helping it grow dramatically. Now, the last example that I've got here is kind of a more traditional organization. Airbnb and Uber are obviously digitally native companies. They were born specifically around a technology idea. And now, while Whirlpool was also born around a technology, obviously a manufacturer of significance for quite some period of time, they've been seeing what's happening in the Internet of Things or the IoT space, these autonomous sensor-loaded appliances that can do all kinds of things by communicating with each other, communicating with you on your mobile device. And so Whirlpool has really taken a very significant effort to increase the innovation and the agility of their organization. They've gone on Google Apps, so that's a good step in the right direction. But even more significantly than moving on to Google Apps, I think they've taken to heart this change management around creating a culture of innovation, creating innovation labs, creating areas and spaces and projects where people can really think deeply about how they could differentiate and bring a unique solution to market, leveraging this technology built into their devices. So a nice example of kind of a true incumbent B2B player sensing the potential for disruption, right? If I have some fantastic idea for a washer dryer, I can go crowdsource it on Kickstarter, manufacture it overseas, and bring it to market in an incredibly short period of time. And if it happens to be the Uber or the Airbnb of washing machines, then Whirlpool could be in trouble, and they know this. And so incumbents throughout the world in every industry are starting to think about, well, how do we become more technology forward? How do we bring some more creativity, some more innovation, some more thought leadership to how we are going to use technology? And in some cases, they'll even certainly use the phrase, how are we going to disrupt ourselves before someone else comes and does it for us? And here's a quote. This actually comes from a survey that MIT, the Sloan Management School, and Capgemini ran in 2013. They looked at over 400 global organizations, and they classified all of the organizations into 4 stages of digital maturity. And so the first thing that sort of comes out as a summary of this is the need to create that transformation through technology, or else someone will come in and disrupt your market and sort of do that for you. But the second thing that came out of that study is that for companies that are at the highest stage of digital maturity, they outperform their competitors across every market and across every segment and geography and industry. I mean, it's unequivocal, the digitally mature organizations compared to the others, how much better they're doing. And specifically, in terms of revenue, almost 10% on average more revenue for the digitally mature compared to the rest, 26% higher profitability, and a 12% market valuation, returning significantly more to the shareholders and investors and ownership of the company. So it's really very clear. This is a very in-depth, long, I think, global study of organizations that produced this data. So it's clear that a sort of reward for performance will come to companies that really undertake this transformation to a digital organization or begin as a digital organization. Let me just stop for a second there and ask Andrew, do we have any questions on the line?
We have I think we have a couple right here that I think will be better served to hold off on towards the end.
Okay.
I think a question that I had that we might be a good point to talk about it here. So this study refers to 400 large firms and how the digital advantage helps them outperform their competitors. Do you see this same sort of impact on the smaller scale companies?
I think it's fundamentally a fact that the more you take advantage of technology, and we'll see as we get into a little bit more into the presentation, the more you can develop this mode of continuous productivity, the more high performance your company will be. And I think that is true across every segment of the industry. I think this particular study is focused on some of the larger entities, but in some ways I think it's actually easier for smaller organizations to make these types of adjustments and adaptations if they're not already taking advantage of those things.
Great points, thanks.
So just kind of continuing this thread of improvement as a result of becoming more digitally mature, we picked out 4 companies that are Google Apps customers, and we tracked their performance versus the index that they trade on. And we sort of demarked the time that they went Google and onto the Google Apps platform. And you can see there that there's clear outperformance of the indices of the markets where these folks trade. And they're across a spectrum of industries. And so I think more data demonstrating the benefit of improving your digital maturity, your digital acumen. So when we look at digital businesses, or if we look at our existing business and try to understand where are the gaps to modify behavior and processes, and we model that after some of the more mature, the leaders in this space, here's what we see when we look at the leaders. So the first one is the leading companies are using web and internet technologies to really make it easy for their customers and prospective customers to find them, to try their services, to like their services, to buy their services. So really engaging with a broad, global, potentially global scale of customers is one of the things we see in digital businesses. The next one is around collective intelligence of the whole organization being accessible by virtually any employee from virtually any location. So data is stored in a centralized, easy-to-access repository where users can get access to the data based on permissions and access that's more associated with the projects they're working on as opposed to the organizational silos that may have built up over time. Of course, work and work processes are increasingly mobile and collaborative and happening in real time. A lot of this theory is about accelerating the work that we do and making communications able to happen in real time. Now, the fourth major aspect of what makes digital businesses fundamentally different is that data has become an asset that is managed and is at the core of many of the decisions that are made by the organization. Data is not a byproduct or an output of the work that is done anymore. It increasingly holds insight and information when it can be aggregated and analyzed effectively. And so I've mentioned, in both examples of Airbnb and Uber, how data is so important to the success of their business model. And then lastly, the technology that people are using is very intuitive. It removes barriers and friction to the process of getting the work done. And increasingly, organizations are looking to consumer-oriented technologies to define and frame the experience that they want to give to their end users. Now, of course, Google offers a tremendous amount of technology available to organizations to leverage in these various transformative areas. In the first area, when it comes to engaging at scale on the internet, significant options that Google has include AdWords and YouTube and the Play Store, emerging ones on Google Plus and Wallet. So there's a huge set of things that are all around enabling your company in a digital marketplace that Google offers. And then on the right-hand side, we get into more of the areas that I live my life around, which are how do we create a significantly high-performing digital workplace. And so all of you are familiar with the app suite and how that enables the collaborative, mobile, real-time activities. Drive and search, I think, are really starting to chip away into that ability to truly centrally store all of the relevant data and files and make them accessible to any employee from anywhere. And then, of course, as we become more mature in our treatment of the data that our organization captures and aggregates and analyzes, we have some opportunities for things like cloud platform and the geo stuff, as well as some of the search stuff. And then finally at the bottom, obviously, everything that Google is doing, I think, attempts to be as intuitive as it can be in the technology space. And we have, I think, a powerful proving ground in the consumer technology space, which is typically where most of these products and services get their start before coming into the enterprise context. So Google really does, I think, offer a fantastic platform for many different types of digital transformation and increasing your organization's digital maturity highlighted here. And then, of course, those of you that are paying attention to some of the stuff that we're articulating and telling stories about is this movement away from the demand model where I type or I speak into my device and ask it a question to a more anticipatory model where my device knows the things that I need to do and makes suggestions and assists me in getting things done. So you've all seen, and probably are some of you are getting now, these Google Now cards that are typically more related to travel and logistical type of things as we tie together some of the location and mobility stuff along with the personal information that you've shared with us in your calendar and things like that. But this has, I think, great potential to evolve into a truly significant value enhancer or work accelerator as we get smarter about your work context and what data is relevant to you at what point in your day based on that context. So a little bit futuristic. I have a feeling it will be rough for some period of time, but before we expect it will be here in some measurable significance. Okay, so looking at all of the areas that technology is likely to impact an organization, it really does touch every single area. And we've talked a lot about workplace, we've talked a little bit about branding stuff. Innovation is a fundamental focus area for organizations. And this is not necessarily something new, but I do think that some of the things coming out of the high-tech industry and some of the things that we're doing here at Google are really specifically focused at creating a culture of innovation and enabling organizations to improve their innovative processes through the practicing of specific frameworks and efforts there. So we have a number of things that we've been involved in, and one of the big ones that I'm personally familiar with is the Creative Skills for Innovation, or CSI, which is a design framework that sort of came out of the Stanford Design School, and we've been using that internally and helping some of our customers use that as well. So every aspect of the organization is likely to require some leaning in when it comes to technology, and the executive leadership really needs to be the stewards of this new digital mindset. Now, when we look at digital enterprises and how the employees are interacting and some of the aspects of the work collaboration that goes on, in a traditional enterprise over on the left, when it comes to agility, things often feel fixed. There's a lot of existing processes that are just sort of churning along and running their course without very much thought into, is this the best way to do it? Is there a better way to do something? Whereas an engaged enterprise demonstrates much more flexibility to adapt to a changing marketplace. And so there's a significant difference in terms of the agility between a traditional enterprise and sort of an engaged and digital enterprise. Transparency is another kind of telltale or significant indicator that can be looked at. In a traditional enterprise, you have these siloed, contained areas of data and communication and process. And in an engaged digital enterprise, things are much, much more open. It's a high degree of transparency. It's one of the things that I love the most about working here at Google, is that as an employee on the inside, there's huge transparency into the things that we're working on. Now it has its downside. It's virtually impossible for us at Google to actually keep anything a secret before we launch it. But again, I'd rather have that trade-off. I'd rather make that trade-off and have the transparency and the openness that we have here at Google. And then when we talk about voice, what we're really talking about there is, are the employees engaged in contributing to the innovation and the transformation that takes place in the organization? In a traditional enterprise, not only are the tools typically just not even available to many of the employees, but there's also not necessarily a culture of open communication about ways to improve things. Whereas an engaged digital enterprise, very active voice, employees across the entire organization are given tools to have their voice be heard, and the culture is created such that every employee is encouraged to contribute their voice to the dialogue. And so as we look at a spectrum, if you will, of innovation, on the far right side, you've got some of these, sort of, again, digitally native companies that have been born on technology and have really burst into their scene and disrupted their industry in large part as a result of technology and innovation. So we talked about Uber. Netflix is another very good case study. Amazon has fundamentally changed the way we shop for things. Khan Academy really significantly impacting the way people learn, people of all ages, not just kids. And then on the left side, you have more of the existing incumbents that have proactively thought about how they need to evolve and become more digitally mature in order to stay competitive. So one of the things that people do ask us sometimes is how do you create a culture of innovation at Google? And I wanted to just highlight a couple things here. Some of you may have heard some of these things before. We're very focused on sort of launching and iterating, right? So a lot of products, when we release them, don't have every feature that every user would want in them, and don't have every feature that an alternative offering might have. But we like to put things out there when we think that they will reach a good level of usage and a good number of users, and then from there we can gather data to be able to iterate on those products. And so, if you look at things like Drive and Hangouts and some of the sort of bigger pieces that are a little bit more recent additions to the fold in Google Apps, you will see tremendous velocity as we've sensed where the market would like us to go and how we're adding features and capabilities to those products. Again, at Google, we're very open. We try to share everything that we can. We have a sort of default that makes it the document shared within the domain, and I think Google Docs and Drive give a great platform for making it easy to share that stuff within your organization. We're very focused on trying to make sure that we hire the best people, and not just people that have a lot of domain expertise, but people that have a demonstrated propensity to learn new things, because we know, well, one thing we do know is that change is constant, and we'll all be working on new things at some point in the not-too-distant future. We allow our employees to really think big and pursue dreams. I'm sure many of you have heard about the 20% thing and some of the things that's produced that are significant products for us today. Ideas coming from everywhere. Again, I think we've, at Google, really been lucky to create a culture where it's very open, the voice is very active, anyone in the organization can submit ideas into numerous different places that absolutely do have visibility up at the most senior level. We make a lot of our decisions based on data. We have a ton of data that comes from our users and our research. And then balancing our portfolio, this kind of goes back to giving people a license to pursue dreams. You always want, I think, some small percentage of your effort and your resources and your allocations to be sort of chasing just wild and crazy dreams. And you've still got 70, 80%, whatever it may be, working on the specific tasks of the ongoing projects. But you always want some risky bets in the portfolio with a limited amount, so to speak. And then, of course, focusing on the user is one of the tenets of our company that we have employed from the very beginning. So before I launch into the last section here, I'll just ask Andrew, any other questions come up that we want to cover now?
You were talking a couple slides back about Google being on more of the disruptive side of technology. And I think there was a good question here talking about how Google sees themselves as disrupting the getting work done realm, and what other competition or other companies have done to kind of create a foothold there that maybe make it difficult to disrupt that area.
Yeah, so that's a great question. The way I look at it is we've been creating these tools that have been available to customers, for 7 years now. And while we've had, I think, really good success, and many of you on the line are testaments to that, I think we still have a tremendous opportunity ahead of us. And I think what we're learning is, the early adopters have done so because of the clear benefits of the technology, and some of the late majority and the long tail pieces, they require more than just great products to get it done, right? They need support from internal, from external, from their business partners, from our apps partners in the case of Google Apps. So there's a lot of different things that come together in any particular instance to get those folks going. And part of it is, how do we allow them to gracefully kind of unhook or uncouple from the technologies that they're using now? And so, one of the examples of that I really like is that Google Drive for Work is now a very effective complement to things like Microsoft Office files, because you can share them most effectively, and you can access them, you can synchronize them across different devices, and sort of add value in that sense. Obviously, Microsoft, as a result of Google Apps, brought their Office 365 product to market. I think they'll absolutely continue to be a legitimate player in the space for a while. And then I think the other thing that's got us hopefully paranoid and disrupting ourselves is all the startups that are coming along in particular areas. So, project management, for an example, is one area where there's a number of startups that are really gaining traction that we're seeing what's going on over there. But I think it is an evolution for organizations, and I think that many times they look at the current technologies and tools that they have, and they don't feel like those are necessarily the ones that are going to allow them to significantly increase their digital maturity. But we see, I think it's going to be, in terms of the big vendors, probably a two to three player race. But at this point, it's two, us and Microsoft, and then a ton of startups, any one of which could come out of relative obscurity and become a significant player in the enterprise space.
Great. I also had one question that might be a good fit for here, because you were just talking about how Google Drive is an example of a product that comes out and you guys iterate on that with a number of different updates. How do you, maybe not with Drive specifically, but I think it could be a good example, how do you balance the Google mindset of releasing a product and then taking in feedback and making changes, maybe with the consumer version of Google Drive, to releasing a fully featured product that's ready for the enterprise, for example?
So another good question. I mean, I think fully featured product ready for the enterprise is somewhat subjective and up to interpretation. I think that we collectively, Google Drive was actually a long time coming. Those of you that have been with us for a while, will maybe even remember some of the early rumors and whatnot. But I think we collectively agreed that we needed to reach a critical mass where we could launch something that would start that product on a path to success and wide adoption, initially by consumers. And then as we've gotten that going and developed momentum and significant usage there's tens of millions, over 100 million users using Drive on the consumer side. We've then, I think, been able to add more and more stuff that actually makes it usable in an enterprise context. Now, if you ask the average IT person that's familiar with Drive, does this meet all of your needs in the enterprise context? The answer would almost certainly be no. But we have to take a little bit of a measured approach to how we deal with input that comes from our customers. Certainly we want as much input and as much data as we can have, but at the same time, there's plenty of evidence to support the fact that you don't necessarily want to listen and try to do everything that every customer tells you. In some ways, this is how the Microsoft products have evolved to a kind of absurdly cumbersome, although familiar, interface for many of us. So we want to get the data inputs, and we certainly are going to advance the product. There's no doubt about that. I have every confidence that we will meet more and more of the needs. But I think we're going to try to do things in a way that's in some ways different from the norm, and hopefully in a way that we together, with our customers, have kind of reimagined some of the stuff that could be done there. So that's sort of our take on it. I mean, it's the same product effectively that runs in the consumer space and the Google for Workspace. It is the same product. There are just some additional security, administrative reporting, compliance type of features that go on when we're using them in the enterprise context. But I think everybody benefits from a service or a tool or a product that is successful in a consumer space, because then it's intuitive technology that's easy to use because hundreds of millions of people are already using it. It's reliable because, again, of that scalability of simultaneous users that we support. And then then we come into this area of, okay, how much of these enterprise controls do we need? How much of these enterprise specific features? And I think we have sort of a good track record and a great path ahead of us to fill some of those value opportunities. But that's fundamentally how we approach that stuff.
Great, thanks, Adam.
You bet. Thanks for the question. That was a good one. So the last little piece here that I want to talk about is something called continuous productivity. And this comes from the gentleman whose picture is there on the left. Some of you may recognize him. His name is Steve Sinofsky. He used to be a very senior executive at Microsoft. He was the guy behind launches of some of the world's favorite Microsoft products, including I believe Internet Explorer and Office and some of the Windows operating systems. He left Microsoft and now is I think a member of the board or an advisor over at Box. But he wrote this fantastic treatise, if you will, on continuous productivity, as he labels it. And I've got the reference down there at the bottom. If you just search for continuous productivity in Sinofsky, you will certainly find this. But here's how he sort of broke it down. And if you haven't read this already, I encourage you to set aside 20 minutes to do so. It's very deep, and I think it's a very accurate and effective assessment of the type of transformation that is happening and that many organizations want to affect within their boundaries. So in a continuous productivity culture, there's a heavy focus on innovation, as I've talked about a whole bunch on this presentation, but being able to do that more and faster, because by compressing the time between interactions of members on a team, you get to go from problem to solution faster, which is fundamentally, what we're trying to do in almost all of our work processes. There's also a very flat hierarchy. So again, traditional enterprises have evolved in many cases into this situation where, middle-level managers and higher-level managers, most of what they do is like controlling information flow up and down the hierarchy. And so in a continuous productivity culture, it's a very flat hierarchy. And employees have equal access to the tools and the information that managers have as well. Improving execution and a high performance level of execution is typically part of this culture of productivity. And then being able to respond to changes based on data. So again, we've got all these signals coming into us, and when we are beginning, or in some places maybe partway down the road, to understanding how to aggregate and synthesize and analyze that data, and in some places we're earlier in understanding how to do that. But I think in a continuous productivity culture, we have those signals coming in and we're able to respond to them. And again, the sort of intuitive technology piece of it. So there'll be, when we talk about evolving, a company that's evolving into a continuous productivity, there's going to be a shift away from the processes themselves into the execution of those processes. And this is a fundamental shift from kind of the management doctrine of the 20th century, which was all about the business process and defining a business process. In order to take advantage of this type of high-performance environment, we need management to kind of step back from some of their traditional decision-making and instead provide context and strategic guidance. And teams will actually be the ones deciding what to do and where to go and how to innovate. And so again, a traditional organization, typically management is responsible and has evolved to the decision maker function. And in a lot of cases, it has bogged down as decisions have worked their way through that process. Now we want to decentralize decision making and push it out to the teams. And this one's one of my favorites. Outside is your friend. So I can't tell you how many customers asked me, when can I get a siloed Google Plus so that I can guarantee that no information transits outside of my boundary. And of course, there's been a fairly religious style stance that we've taken on this, which is to say you're not going to get a truly fully siloed Google Plus. And while that has created friction in the short term for some of our customers, I think the reality is that we're all starting to see the benefits of collaboration and information gathering from outside the boundaries of our enterprise. So I love the way Sinofsky has kind of summarized this into, outside is your friend. You need to figure out a way to allow those types of things to happen. And so again, I think, Andrew, this goes back to one of the questions you just asked me. Google Plus started obviously as a consumer product. As we've rolled it into the enterprise space, we've added a little bit more capabilities that allow closer to that controlled communication without completely creating a true and total silo. I mean, I think it's more of a fear and concern of what happens when we open up some of those boundaries versus understanding the value that comes from opening those boundaries in the proper way.
Yeah, and I think for those of you who are listening and haven't explored Google Plus too much, I think one of the great ways that Adam is referring to is with Google Plus communities. With Google Apps, there's a ton of options available to kind of siphon off your employees into a private community where you can still have that social network feel, but not allow anyone else to join or find the community. So there's some great options there inside of Google Plus.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've fairly recently opened up some of the APIs around creating and managing communities and other grouping objects. So again, I think more of that type of control coming to the hands of the IT folks without shutting off completely that opportunity to reach beyond the boundaries of the organization. Another thing that I think is really critical is the employees see the management team participate using the same tools that the employees are using. And gone are the days, I think, of senior leadership dictating memos to their administrative assistants and sending those out through email as a way of sort of communicating to everyone, right? There's no engagement there. There's no dialogue. There's none of that. And so Google's a great example. I mean, Larry Page is pretty prolific on Google+. Amit Singh, the head of Google for Work, is extremely prolific, both internal and external on these things. And so it's important for the employees to feel as though management is absolutely engaged and sort of out there in the trenches to some extent, but aware of what's going on and participating in some of the same types of activities that I think increase openness and transparency and voice and ultimately agility. And then the other thing that Sinofsky talks a lot about is individuals owning the devices and choosing the latest pieces of technology to work on. So presumably there's at least a number of folks out on the line today with iPhone 6s. I'm sure you bought those yourself, and if you're doing work on that iPhone 6, the organization really is the owner, the creator, the manager of the IP that comes as a result of doing that work. So I think this is, again, increasingly going to become the norm as opposed to the previous norm of the 20th century, which was where the firm, the organization, provided the technology to the employees. In a continuous productivity environment, individuals and teams will work differently. So there will be a lot more sensing of data and responding to it. We've talked a fair bit about that. A lot of bottom-up, network-centric decision-making, analysis, and resolution. And this team and crowds that span the internal and the external, I just talked a bit about that on the previous slide. Outside is our friend. And then an unstructured work rhythm, right? So away from the norm of the 20th century around a specific business process that is supposed to occur in a specific rhythm. Now we see more and more work occur at sort of different intervals, different time zones, different hours, but oriented more around the flow of the work itself and the communications, real-time or near real-time communications for the team that's involved in doing that work. And if you do it well, you get to be Darth Vader sipping from the Guinness glass. And then data becomes pervasive, right? This allows us to take advantage of the data that our organizations are building and become more mature about aggregating, synthesizing, analyzing, asking questions of that data and then making decisions about what to do in the future based on that data. Continuously sharing, always having the most up-to-date version of the data. Obviously, this is like a tenet of Google Docs and Drive, right? Is that there's no more of this, oh, what version of the file is it? Or, you know, those printed reports that you brought to the report, where do they come from? They're not consistent with some other piece of data. Everybody's operating from the same playbook, the same snap count, and the current, the most current set of data. And then again, it informs our decisions and allows us over time to guide the company according to a path that has the best statistical probability of success. There's no such thing as the right answer anymore, and it doesn't, you know, when we're creating a product or a service and bringing it to market, there are varying degrees of success and performance. And as we bring products to market and as we iterate on them, we want to be able to make those, chart those paths based on the data. And of course, the more people that use it, the more data that we get, the more valuable the data becomes. So just kind of in summary, we talked at the beginning about how technology is giving rise to new digital enterprises, but also really putting pressure on incumbents to adapt and in some cases disrupt their own existing processes in order to take advantage of technology. And then we talked quite a bit about sort of continuous productivity. And I love the fact, if you go and read that article, I mean, it's just astounding to me that that comes from the guy who was at the top of Microsoft, you know, who clearly understood, very smart guy, really understood the technology and the work organizational psychology that has been going on over the past 20 years and sees the future for what it is, in large part driven by, you know, major technology implications and disruption in every aspect of our lives. So with that, let me open it up for any other questions that may have come in. Andrew, do we have any on the line?
Yeah, it looks like we've got some great questions, and I just wanted to mention the continuous productivity article that you referenced with Sinofsky. Someone was kind enough to post a link in the Q&A section of the Hangout. Thanks a lot, Olivia. So if you're interested in reading that article, you can just go ahead and click on that link, and it'll take you right there. As far as questions go, there's one here that I think is a really great question from Andy, and he asks, do you think it's important for cloud SaaS providers like Google and Box and, you know, all those other different realms to make an effort to work together, or do you think it's on the consumer and the, you know, the company side to, you know, start to migrate to one single solution?
Yeah, a good question. I think fundamentally, at least from the Google perspective, we are interested in really creating a platform. So we're, you know, opening up as many places as we can that make it logical for other providers to come in and integrate with that, right? So we've got a number of things going on the Drive front that are examples of that. On the Hangouts front, we've done some initial work that's still been in the early stages, so some of the APIs on the Hangout side have not been fully exposed, but it is definitely our plan to do that. I do think, though, that the model has to work in a sense that a customer has to see enough value, or a group of customers need to see enough value in the integration of Google and some other product that it sort of, you know, drives us to create the right set of APIs and drives the third party to build elegantly on top of that. But fundamentally, that is what we want to enable. I think it does put a little bit of onus on the organization or group of organizations that want that value to push for it to happen, and then probably in some cases to have to, you know, sort of smooth over a few rough edges as they actually roll it out and implement it. But a lot of times, you know, it's a very valuable combination that's worth dealing with any small friction points that might come at the customer side of the integration layer.
Great, thanks. I just want to, we're going to keep going through some of these questions, but I do want to say, for those of you who aren't able to stick with us, if we go a little bit over the hour, I am going to make the attendance form for this session available in the Showcase app. So if you want to make sure that you put your information down for the attendance form, you can do that. That will be in the Showcase app on the right-hand side of the screen, and I'll also post that on the event page as well afterwards. But let's go ahead and keep going through these questions and see if we can get through as many as we can. So we talked about at the beginning about the digitally mature organizations, and we talked about that on the enterprise scale, and then I asked about on the that maybe the SMB scale, and we got a question from Andy about how that impact can positively affect the EDU side. I don't know how much input you have on that, Adam, but I know from my research, I think there's a ton of information out there about how these wide-scale Chromebook deployments that schools have done has seen huge impact in terms of productivity for schools. So Adam, if you can maybe touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple things come to mind. I mean, first of all, we at Google are extremely committed to the education space, right? We've had Google Apps for Education available for free. We've had really, really great adoption of that technology here in sort of the Silicon Valley area. As far as I can tell, virtually all of the public schools, the elementary schools, are all using Google Apps. I think that is true in other parts of the country, but certainly other tools are being used as well. And the Chromebooks have, Andrew, to your point, really that's the market that they've taken off in, because I think it's just a perfect fit for that sort of initial first set of benefits that Chromebooks offer, cost, of course, being probably the primary one, but also the super ability to share devices amongst users in a very secure and compliant fashion. The ability to recover devices and all of that stuff fits perfectly in the education framework. I think just a little bit beyond that, kids today are growing up in this environment where all they know is real-time or near real-time communication, right? It's all text messaging, social networking stuff, all online, all through their devices. And I think as these kids get older, and even now as the ones that are coming into the workplace are coming in with this as their primary or maybe only existence, I think that's going to really push this whole technology agenda and accelerate it, right? Whether they're coming out and doing something entrepreneurial, like virtually every startup uses Google Apps because it's just, I think, the most logical choice to make when you're just getting started. But they're also going to join larger organizations or mid-sized organizations that are still using some of the sort of legacy stuff, and they're going to put increasing pressure, or they're just going to do it themselves, right? We see they'll take whatever tools are given to them by the firm and sort of ignore those and route their data into the tools of their choice. So, a lot of things there. We're very passionate about education. I love some of the things we're doing. I'll actually be down in EDUCAUSE in Orlando next week, kind of supporting our efforts there. And so if there are any educators on the line that are going to be in EDUCAUSE, I'll be there next Tuesday. So swing by the booth and we can meet in person.
Yeah, and I think on top of that, not only do you see, referring to Chromebooks specifically about enabling students to be more productive and enhance the learning experience, but you also see with Google Apps how it's able to enable the educators as well. Classroom just came out this year, which has been a great tool to bring all of that classroom management into one single view, and the new Drive add-ons have also been huge for educators that I've spoken with. I know Doctopus was a little bit tricky to work with as an app script, but now as an add-on, it's been an awesome tool for people to use in a lot more easy-to-use interface.
Yeah, I've been hearing a lot more from people that I've talked to at various events and conferences about the cool things that they're doing with Chrome extensions that they're getting, the add-ons that are available. And yeah, I mean, the energy and the passion that we see from some of the teachers and the educators, a lot of that comes through at EDUCAUSE as well. I'm really looking forward to hearing from some of those folks what they're doing with the tools and how they're getting their students to engage. And I think all of that stuff is really going to provide a solid foundation for these people as they join the workforce. I mean, it's an increasingly globally competitive environment, and so we want our kids to come out really prepared to use technology to the fullest advantage that they can. So I'm super excited and super passionate about the stuff we're doing there. Classroom is another. Classroom, I'm going to make a bold prediction here. Nobody write this down or anything. The Classroom could be one of the first products that actually came from the EDU space that then comes over into the apps for workspace. A lot of people are looking at Classroom for some of their internal training needs and stuff like that. And obviously, we'd love to make that happen, but it's going to be like a lot of other things at Google. We have to make it a success, in a certain market first, and then see if it can be adapted to operate in the enterprise context. But I know a number of enterprise customers that when Classroom came out kind of pinged me and said, "Hey, we already have a tool that we use for our training and learning, and it's got challenges. Can Classroom maybe offer an alternative?" So we're going to explore that in the future.
Great. There's just a couple quick questions that I want to touch on before we wrap up. But Adam, I wanted to ask you, we're getting a few questions about making this presentation available afterwards. I know this recording will be available on this Google Plus event page, so if you want to share the video with anyone, you can do that, and it's also available on our YouTube channel. Adam, are you able to make your slide presentation available?
Yes.
Okay, great. So Adam can post that in the gCON Google Plus community, so that'll be easily available for everyone. So if you just search gCON inside of Google Plus, you'll be able to find the community there if you haven't already joined it. One of the questions that I wanted to touch on, we talked about how outside is your friend in the continuous productivity section. How do you balance outside is your friend in a HIPAA compliant world?
So the world of HIPAA compliance is an exciting world. Let's see. So, fundamentally, I don't think that the aspect of outside versus inside materially changes the requirement that HIPAA stipulates, which is that you have to, take special precautions to protect the medically sensitive data. So if we're looking at it from a risk management perspective, which is really the only perspective to look at all of these, you certainly do need to think about things like Google Plus and email and any other form of communication and how you take steps to protect that sensitive data from transiting through those channels. And so what we've done on the Google Plus side is we've opened up some auditing APIs and some reporting stuff, which is probably just the very tip of the iceberg in terms of what could be done to allow that type of inspection of the Google Plus content, the posts. I think you have to think very carefully about how you deploy a tool like Google Plus, and I believe that fairly recently we made it possible to kind of turn the service on for some subgroups, some structures inside the organization, but not for all. And then through the use of things like restricted communities, you can also, I think, with fairly managed risk, open up Google Plus for internal usage. But the question was specifically about external stuff. Then you need to think about either some proactive monitoring or auditing that would need to be built on top of the Google Plus APIs, or you could look to some of the third parties that we have out there, CloudLock being one that often comes up quickly in this conversation. They're one of the ones kind of setting the pace for development on top of these APIs. And those are some of the things you need to look at as you evaluated opening up Google Plus in a HIPAA-compliant environment.
Sorry about that. It looks like I was muted for a second. I think that just about wraps up questions for today. We're already over the session, so I don't want to keep Adam for too long. So I wanted to say thank you very much, Adam, for joining us. It was a great presentation. I definitely learned a lot, and I hope everybody else did too.
Thank you, Andrew. It was great to be here. I appreciate the invitation.
All right, so before I sign off here, I just want to make sure everybody has a chance to sign up for the rest of our presentations today. We have 2 more breakout sessions, one in a little less than an hour. That's Get More Blank Done with SN Google Apps. That'll be a discussion on how the communication tools can boost productivity with Google Apps as well as with ESNA. And then we'll also have a presentation with our friends from Zendesk about how IT is changing the nature of support and turning it from more of a just dealing with maintaining uptime to really starting to enable users to use the full feature set of their products. So if you haven't already, please take a moment to register for those sessions, and hopefully we'll see you in an hour for the next one. Thanks a lot, everybody.